Yo, this video is part of a 31 lesson course on Vital and sound design, links in the pinned comment and description. Yo, now there's one more thing I want to briefly touch on before I get to more practical examples, and that is the interaction between effects, because usually when you're making a patch you're likely to use more than one, and some of these have some interesting ways of feeding into each other and their order can matter some. The easiest example to start with would just be a reverb. So I've got this saw here and I can compress it and put some reverb after. Now notice what happens if I put the reverb before the compression. It gets a lot louder, because this upwards compression here, these three lower bands are pushing everything that's quiet up, so of course the reverb gets pushed up. Now if I put the reverb down here, we don't get the same effect, so that's something to be aware of. Another case where this can happen is distortion, because distortion also tends to compress a sound. So distorting reverb can be a lot of fun. Just a bit of reverb after the distortion. But now the reverb is really quite loud. Well, here the sound is a lot shorter. Yeah, essentially it's mostly this distortion and this compression that are kind of have interesting properties depending on where you put them, because they depend so much on the volume of the sound that's coming into them. Now, something else you might want to experiment with is related to the delay. It's about combining filters and delays, because delay kind of does the time around sound. Previous states of a sound are going to reflect into the future, which is like a very abstract and unnecessarily complicated way of saying something very simple, but I'm gonna make an LFO that just turns a filter up and down like this, and it kind of filters everything. But as you can hear, if we put the filter in front of the delay, suddenly the high frequencies that are only present at this point in time because the filter is moving up are now put into this delay feedback loop, and they're kind of ringing out in different ways. So this is another example where changing the order of two effects can make quite a substantial difference, as you can hear. You can also hear this with reverb, of course, but it's just a little less obvious. You can hear the higher frequencies kind of swelling and lingering. Well, here the filter is like aggressively just removing them. These kinds of things are all good to be aware of, and it's always a nice idea to just see if maybe changing the order around of some effects makes your sound in some way more interesting, cooler, or maybe solves a problem that you're kind of facing. Now there's something else. Vital kind of already hints at this. If you have a look at the distortion, you'll see there's this filter you can put before or after the distortion. And the reason for this is just that filters, especially before distortion, really influence it. Now, of course, this isn't the only filter we can use. If I just like driving the resonance into a distortion or something like that can lead to some really cool kind of screeching effects. I'm gonna turn this filter off for now, because we can also just use this filter here. You can hear just the filter. Quite a boring old filter. Maybe a bit quiet here. But if we put it into distortion, you can hear the kind of crunchiness you get. So filters and distortions are kind of best friends. You can't really master distortion without understanding filters and the way they interact with it. Now, this isn't the only filter. As you might remember from the explanation of the phaser, this is also just a filter. So like maybe I'm gonna turn the depth down, and you can create all these interesting kinds of, just if I just listen to the phaser on its own. You know, it's a phaser, but with distortion. There's a lot going on there. This, of course, doesn't sound very nice, but sometimes you don't really want something that sounds all that nice. You want something that sounds a bit more dark, a bit more gritty, especially when you're working with distortion. Of course, we can also try it with some other distortion types. You can see how it takes a sort of different, more resonant and not as bright character with a sine fold or maybe with a linear fold. You can hear this kind of high frequency crunch. And then of course we can take the compressor and just maybe use it to control gain some, and to take this high frequency crunch and really push it up. This way we can get a lot more mileage from our simple effects. We can also use a delay as a kind of filter, because as you turn the delay time down, you can get this kind of ringing from it. This quickly gets you in quite experimental territory, which may or may not be what you want. And this equalizer, of course, also putting this in front of the distortion, just like maybe pushing the mid-band, or just taking the low frequencies down, can really affect the way your sound is being distorted. So that was it. Hope you found it helpful. What you just saw was part of a 10th lesson on effects, which is on effects combinations and interactions. It follows explanations of all the effects and a chapter on the fundamental, and then later in the course we get to different patches. I'll make some sounds for you, show you how you can use these techniques, and then later we'll get into some more advanced techniques like physical modeling and pitch humanization. So yeah, if you want to learn Vital, I'll link it in the pinned comment in the description. Thanks for watching. Cheers.